Hi, I'm Reed, and you're watching Teen Kids News. Let's start with our top story. Teens talk a lot about college, but every 4 years, the country talks about a college that has nothing to do with test scores and applications. It's a key part of how our democracy works, but it's kinda complicated.
The candidates for president campaign all across the country. First, you'll see them in the states with the earliest primary elections. Those elections lead to the conventions, where the political parties choose their nominees. After the conventions, the focus is on states that deliver a big punch in something called the Electoral College. And just what is that?
I have no idea what that is.
I don't know.
I've learned about it, but I don't remember exactly. It involves the voting for the president.
Oh, Electoral College. I know this. I learned this in 6th grade. I'm sorry. I still don't know. It just rings a bell.
The Electoral College is a system that was put in place by the founders in the Constitution, and it is the process by which we elect presidents every 4 years. But essentially, it gives states the right to elect a president rather than through a direct popular vote.
Just so we're clear, when Americans vote, their votes don't go directly to the presidential candidates. Rather, the votes go to electors in the voter's state. It's these electors, not the people who went to the polls, who actually vote for the president. That's why during the election, you'll often hear the term electoral votes. The number of electoral votes each state gets depends on two things. First, every state, plus the District of Columbia, is guaranteed at least 3 electoral votes.
The idea is to have each state have a certain weight. The focus for the founders was not letting the large states get more power than the small states.
And that brings us to the second factor that determines how many electoral votes a state gets: population. As Suzanne just explained,
the focus for the founders was not letting the large states get more power than the small states.
However, the Founding Fathers realized that they couldn't ignore the fact that population size varied from state to state. So, a formula was worked out that gave states more electoral votes if they had more population. So, Montana, with its population of a little over 1 million, gets 3 electoral votes, while California's population of almost 40 million entitles it to 54 electoral votes. Still with me? Okay, now listen to this. You'd think that if half the people in the state vote for one candidate and half vote for the other, then the electoral votes would be allocated accordingly. Not so. Only 2 states, Nebraska and Maine, allocate their electoral votes according to the popular vote. Instead, most states are winner takes all.
The winner takes all concept means that each state gives all of its electoral votes based on the popular vote in that state. So if candidate A wins the majority of the popular votes, he or she gets all of that state's electoral votes.
And here's what can happen. Let's say candidate A wins every popular vote in South Carolina. Its population is a little over 5 million. Candidate B wins all the popular votes in New Mexico and Nebraska. Their combined population is about 4 million. In a direct election, candidate A would win. He or she got the most votes from the people who went to the polls. But let's now look at the electoral votes. New Mexico and Nebraska each have 5, for a total of 10, but South Carolina only has 9. So here's an example of how candidate A can win the popular vote, but still lose the presidential election.
No, I don't think it's fair.
I don't think it's fair.
I don't think it's fair. I think the person with the popular vote should win because more overall votes should get the win instead of more electoral votes.
In fact, many surveys show that most Americans would like to get rid of the Electoral College and elect the president through a direct popular vote.
So whether or not it will ever be overturned is anyone's guess. It seems unlikely because it requires a constitutional amendment, which is a pretty onerous hill to climb, but it works. And it has fulfilled what the founders wanted, which was to have a republic where each state has their say.
Throughout American history, the selection of a president by the Electoral College usually reflected the popular vote. But there have been a few occasions when this was not the case. The most recent example was in 2016. Hillary Clinton won more popular votes than Donald Trump, but Trump gained more electoral votes, and he became president. For Teen Kids News, I'm Alexandra.
You could talk to your legislators, you can go to protests, or talk to even your mayor. You can make changes in your own town if you live somewhere small, or even in big cities. All you have to do is write a letter.
We've got lots more coming up on Teen Kids News, so stick around. And be sure to follow us on Instagram and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you never miss out on Teen Kids News. We'll be right back. There's a poem from the 1800s that holds a lesson that is probably even more important today. Of all sad words of tongue or pen, the saddest are these: it might have been. The lesson is not to let fear of failure keep us from taking advantage of opportunities. That's why we call this series, If at First You Don't Succeed,
Back in the 1960s, a scientist working at the 3M company experimented with creating an adhesive glue that was super strong. Unfortunately, his experiments failed, spectacularly. Rather than being super strong, the glue was super weak. The most it could hold was a light piece of paper. Interestingly, when you removed the paper, none of the adhesive was left on the surface. It took more than 5 years, but finally, another worker at 3M heard about this gentle adhesive and came up with a brilliant idea. Create small, square pads with removable pages. On the back of each page would be a thin strip of adhesive, and market these pads as a great way to leave a note. And that was the birth of Post-its. You might say that despite initial failure, enterprising employees at 3M stuck with it and created a product that earns the company millions of dollars a year. With If at First You Don't Succeed, I'm Emily for Teen Kids News.
although roads were built for cars, they're also shared by people walking, biking, or riding on scooters. So the National Road Safety Foundation has this message about sharing the road.
I'm excited to show you the sights here in Washington.
Cool, I'm learning about them in school.
Look, there's the U.S. Capitol.
Auntie, what's that?
The Lincoln Memorial. And of course, that's the...
Look out!
Don't miss the other cool videos created by the NRSF. It's easy to see more. Simply like, follow, and subscribe to the National Road Safety Foundation. We'll be back with more Teen Kids News right after this. If the thought of sitting down and writing a long essay makes your heart pound and palms sweat, you'll no doubt be impressed by this story. We're about to meet an author who's written an entire book while still in middle school.
That's right. She was only 11 when Ruby Lefebvre Norland decided to write a novel. It's called The Ways of Wolves. Now 13 years old, Ruby recently had a book signing. That must have been exciting to have people lining up to buy your book and asking you to sign it. Can you describe it?
Yeah, it was really great. I had more than 50 people showed up. I'm not too great around big crowds, but I felt like it went really well. I read an excerpt from my book to the people.
I'm sure it went well. Now, your story is about a young wolf named Blue Jay. Abandoned by his family, he struggles to find a pack he can join. What gave you the idea to write about an orphaned wolf?
Well, I've always loved wolves and nature, and it's just been something I've loved my whole life. So writing about it and making Blue Jay as a character, it was just really interesting to put him in that situation for me and see what would happen.
We don't want to give away the story, so let me just ask, what did you want readers to take away from your book?
Well, I'm hoping they learn a lesson from Blue Jay's story about kindness and forgiving others, even if they've done you wrong.
That's certainly a good message. What inspired you to tackle such a big challenge as writing a book?
Well, for me, just because I love writing and I had the time. I was the pandemic, so everyone was inside and they had lots of time on their hands. And for me, I just spent that time writing and doing what I loved.
Like most of us, you spent much of that time at home. But unlike most of us, you live in a rather unusual community. It's on the West Coast, in Washington State. You and your family live on an island called Ketron in Puget Sound. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's a fairly isolated island, only about 10 houses on it. So there's not much for you to do, but I like it because I get a lot of inspiration for my stories from like the isolated area and the wilderness.
Wow, 10 houses? How many people live there?
I believe the population is 24.
My science class has more students than that. So what's school like?
Well, I do online school with Washington Virtual Academies, so I feel like I'm able to manage my schedule and have a lot of flexibility for writing and doing anything else I want to do.
Okay, so after you wrote The Ways of Wolves, how did you get it published?
I self-published with a website, which isn't how it's not like traditional publishing, but I feel like it worked better for me.
For those of us who don't know about self-publishing, how does it work?
Well, for me, I just I sent my writing in and I answered questions about how I wanted the book to be or be sold at. So I feel like it was pretty simple.
Is it expensive?
It was a bit expensive, but I don't plan to do it for every one of my books. I just feel like it was a really good option for a first.
Best of luck on this book and any others you write.
Thank you.
If you feel you might have a book inside you, but are intimidated by the fear that you can't do it, listen to this. A. Milne, the man who wrote the Winnie the Pooh story, said, "Almost anyone can be an author." Okay, now that you have that encouragement, get writing. And when you get published, you can write to thank us. For Teen Kids News, I'm Reese.
We have to take a quick break, but don't go away because Teen Kids News will be right back. When it comes to dealing with stress, Zendaya draws on a childhood pastime. She likes to color. In fact, her home has a coloring station filled with crayons and piles of coloring books. Clearly, Zendaya has mastered the art of de-stressing.
In southern England stands an amazing prehistoric structure. This is Stonehenge. Its believed construction of the circles of stones started more than 5,000 years ago, and the stones are ginormous, some weighing around 25 tons each. Many believe Stonehenge was built as an astronomical observatory to track the paths of the sun and moon. Others think it served as a location for religious practices. You might be surprised to learn that America also has a Stonehenge. Kinda, sorta. It's located in the western part of Nebraska, near the city of Alliance. But instead of being built of huge stones like England's Stonehenge, this one is made up of old cars. It was created by Jim Reinders in honor of his father. Besides being wacky enough to build this monumental copy of Stonehenge, Reinders also had a wacky sense of humor. He named his monument Carhenge. For Teen Kids News, I'm Mason.
Do you recognize this game? If you said Chinese checkers, you're right. Except for two things. First of all, it's not really a game of checkers. And second, it has nothing to do with China. This game was actually invented in Germany. So why call it Chinese checkers? When it was marketed in America back in the 1920s, the company thought the catchy name would sell more games. For Teen Kids News, I'm Katerina.
Well, that's our show for this week. Tune in here for more Teen Kids News next week. Or catch us anytime on our socials. See you then.